In every war, some heroes were never named, and some stories were written in blood and smoke. This is the story of the gunner who looked death in the eye and changed the sky forever. You are watching Bloodstained Chronicles. Hit subscribe and join us as we uncover the forgotten souls of war, whose courage still echoes through time. October 14th, 1943, 25,000 feet over Germany. The world below is a smear of cloud and fire. The air is so thin it bites. Aluminum giants drift through a sky alive with flack blossoms, black flowers blooming in silence before thunder catches up. Inside one of them, a flying fortress named Mary Jane. A man crouches in the tail, his body wedged into a bubble of glass and steel no bigger than a closet. Frost creeps across the plexiglass. He can see the condensation of his own breath clouding his view, then clearing again, revealing a streak of sunlight on the horizon, and beneath it a swarm of dark specks rising fast. His name is Technical Sergeant Anthony Romano, 23 years old, gunner of the 91st Bomb Group. Around him, the fortress shudders as the formation adjusts altitude. Over the intercom comes the familiar crackle, calm voices hiding fear. "Bandits, 6 o'clock low." Romano's fingers tighten on the twin 50 cals. He can already hear them before he sees them, the faint hum that grows into a scream. Tracers streak past, carving orange lines through blue air. The whole tail vibrates as bullets punch holes through metal. Romano fires short, measured bursts, conserving ammunition, watching empty shell casings scatter around his boots. In the middle of that chaos, he notices something. The enemy always appears from a blind angle. No matter how fast he turns, there's a moment, one deadly second, when he can't see what's coming. That thought, small and stubborn, lodges in his mind even as the sky burns around him. The mission to Schweinfurt ends with half the group missing. When they land, ground crews count the holes and shake their heads. Romano steps out, shoulders stiff, his jacket soaked with sweat despite the cold. He doesn't speak much on the truck ride back to the huts, but the idea won't leave him. A way to see what's unseen, a way to stay alive. Winter settles over the English countryside. Airfields that once smelled of grass now reek of oil and cordite. The 8th Air Force has been fighting a war of attrition. For every mission completed, bombers vanish into the clouds and never return. Germany's industrial heart, Schweinfurt, Regensburg, Bremen, demands daily punishment, and the price is blood. The crews know the odds. They mark missions on hut walls like prisoners counting days. 25 sorties mean a ticket home, but few reach it. The brass in London debates daylight strategy, precision versus survival. By night, the RAF burns cities. By day, the Americans aim for factories, believing accuracy will shorten the war. Instead, it lengthens the casualty lists. Each week, new replacements arrive, faces paled from training in the calm skies of Texas. They're handed cold coffee, a cot, and a slot in a crew whose laughter hides exhaustion. Romano watches them, remembering his first day at Bassingbourn, the smell of damp canvas, the distant wail of sirens during a raid, the taste of fear that never quite leaves the mouth. He's become one of the old hands now, though he's barely older than the rest. In the mess hall, he sketches on scraps of paper, rough outlines of his gun position, arrows marking fields of fire, angles of approach. He isn't an engineer, but he's lived long enough inside that metal cage to know its limits. One night, while the wind howls across the runway, he takes a piece of polished scrap from a wrecked plane and holds it up behind him, checking the reflection of the tail. The thought becomes an experiment. Maybe a mirror, simple, adjustable, could fill the blind spot that's taken so many friends. He mentions it to his waist gunner, who laughs, then nods. Can't hurt to try. The next morning, Romano finds a broken side mirror from a jeep in the maintenance yard, wipes off the grime, and bolts it to the rear bulkhead with whatever tools he can borrow. It's crude, shaky, and not regulation. But when he sits back in position and looks through it, he sees something new, the narrow strip of sky he's never been able to watch before. A full hour passes as he adjusts angles, marking tape lines so it won't slip during turbulence. He doesn't tell command. Paperwork kills ideas faster than flak. The first test comes on a milk run over the French coast. Clouds scatter light in silver sheets. Romano checks the mirror, catches a flicker, sunlight glinting off a canopy long before the intercom warning. He shouts coordinates. The formation shifts. The attack breaks early. When they return, his pilot raises an eyebrow. "How the hell did you see them so soon?" Romano just taps the bit of glass behind him and shrugs. Word spreads quietly among the crews. A mirror, some laugh, others ask to see it. Within days, a few tail gunners scavenge their own. The flight chief frowns but says nothing. Unofficial tricks are as old as war. Yet for the first time in months, Romano feels a kind of fragile control, like he's taken back 1 second of life from death's schedule. Through spring 1944, missions pile up: Regensburg, Augsburg, Brunswick. The fortress formations crawl across Europe under constant attack. Luftwaffe pilots, veterans of the Eastern Front, strike in disciplined waves. They know where the blind spots are. They train to exploit them. But slowly, reports trickle in of gunners spotting enemies earlier, breaking attacks sooner. Ground officers notice the pattern. Someone finally asks why. A young lieutenant from maintenance, Jack Harlan, visits Romano's hardstand. He examines the setup, scribbles notes. "You realize this isn't standard issue?" Romano nods. "Neither is staying alive." Harlan laughs and leaves, but 2 weeks later, new mirrors appear in the supply truck. Unofficial, unnumbered, but clearly sanctioned. The modification spreads through squadrons like folklore. Mechanics call it Romano's eye. By March, the strategic picture begins to change. The introduction of long-range escort fighters, the P-51 Mustang foremost, alters everything. With the Mustangs flying cover deep into Germany, the bombers no longer feel abandoned once the channel fades behind them. Still, the attrition continues. Every improvement, no matter how small, matters. The Army Air Force's High Command compiles field innovations: heated gloves fashioned from wiring, makeshift armor plating from spent shell cases, and now the tail mirror. In Washington, a colonel reading a report under fluorescent light adds a note in the margin: recommend inclusion in future tail turret designs. It's a quiet, bureaucratic echo of Romano's midnight tinkering. He'll never see it, but it marks the point where invention becomes doctrine. On April 11th, the target is Berlin. The crews call it the Big B. The morning briefing smells of sweat and burnt coffee. Maps stretched across walls show a black line cutting into the heart of Germany. "Flak concentration. Severe," the intelligence officer says flatly. Romano listens, chewing the inside of his cheek. Outside, the fortresses wait in neat rows, silver skins gleaming under a pale sun. Engines cough to life one by one, the air filling with the low thunder of 1,200 propellers. As they climb through the overcast, he looks once more into his mirror. For a moment he sees his own eyes staring back, bloodshot, older than they should be. Then movement, tiny dots rising from the haze. He calls it in before anyone else can. The formation tightens. Traces streak upward, curving like fireflies. The Luftwaffe comes hard that day, but the bombers reach the target and turn for home with fewer losses than anyone expected. In the debriefing tent, Harlan claps him on the shoulder. "Guess your little piece of glass works." Romano just nods, exhausted beyond words. The missions keep coming, one after another, until the calendar itself loses meaning. Each dawn feels the same, mist curling over the airfield, the smell of diesel and coffee, the metallic whine of ground carts charging batteries. The men age faster than the seasons. Letters from home arrive, creased and fingerprinted, carrying the ghost of normal life. Romano keeps his in a tin box beneath his bunk, his mother's looping handwriting, a photo of his kid sister in a summer dress, a postcard of the Statue of Liberty sent by a friend who'd shipped out before him. Between missions, he studies the mirror again, refining its position, teaching others how to set theirs. Soon, every fortress in the 91st has one installed, some made from truck glass, others from the backs of shaving kits. It becomes routine maintenance, check ammunition, test oxygen, clean mirror. Small rituals of survival that no manual ever taught. In the sky, the war feels endless. Over Brunswick, a B-17 beside them takes a direct hit. The tail shears off, tumbling end over end through sunlight before vanishing in cloud. The intercom goes quiet after the pilot murmurs a curse. Romano watches the mirror, expecting to see more fighters diving in, but the space behind stays clear for a breathless minute. He exhales, realizes he's been holding his breath. On landing, the pilot thanks him in that clipped way men do when gratitude feels too heavy for words. The crew chief chalks another notch on the fuselage, Mission 22. That night, the officers brief the crews on a new target, aircraft factories, feeding the Luftwaffe's dwindling strength. Intelligence photos show vast hangars outside Munich, camouflage nets stretched like spiderwebs over the roofs. The idea is to cripple Germany's production before D-Day. It's risky, deep into defended territory. Some men volunteer to fill gaps in decimated crews. Romano doesn't hesitate. For him, every flight feels like borrowed time anyway. Before takeoff, he polishes the mirror with his sleeve, not out of superstition but habit, the way a soldier checks his rifle one last time. The Munich raid is chaos from the start. Cloud cover forces the bombers lower, right into the flak zone. Shells burst at eye level, black smoke punching holes in formation discipline. Romano's mirror vibrates violently. He can barely make out the reflection. Then he sees a glint. Fighters approaching from 7 o'clock, weaving through the smoke. He yells coordinates. Waist gunners pivot, open fire, the air filling with the thunder of synchronized guns. One fighter breaks apart mid-air, its pieces spinning like shards of glass. The rest scatter. By the time the formation emerges over open countryside, the sky behind them is clear. The navigator notes later that their group suffered half the expected losses. Nobody calls it luck. Word travels through unofficial channels. Some crews send back letters praising Romano's mirror fix. A few newspapers back home print brief mentions of field-borne innovations helping our boys in the air. In Washington, engineers at Wright Field study reports of tail gunner visibility, sketching new turret designs, incorporating curved reflective panels. The pace of technological evolution accelerates. Bombing accuracy improves, fighter escorts coordinate through radar guidance, and small ideas from the field feed into larger strategic machines. Yet for Romano and his crew, the changes feel distant. Their world is still wind, cold, and the constant thud of engines. By early May 1944, the air war reaches a turning point. The Allies are preparing for the invasion of France. Every available plane is thrown into softening targets, bridges, rail lines, fuel depots. Losses remain brutal, but morale begins to rise with rumors of an end in sight. Romano senses it too, though he no longer allows himself hope. During one mission over northern France, flak tears through the waist of their plane, wounding a gunner. Romano crawls forward, drags him back to the radio compartment, and returns to his post. Later, as medics load the injured man onto a stretcher, he glances at the mirror again, now cracked by shock vibration, but still intact. "Still watching my back," he mutters, half to himself. When the invasion finally comes in June, the bombers take off before dawn. From altitude, Romano sees the channel below, glittering with ships, a steel armada stretching to the horizon. It's a sight that brings silence to every crew. For the first time, they aren't flying toward abstract dots on a map, but toward history unfolding beneath their wings. Fighters still rise to meet them, but fewer now. The Luftwaffe is bleeding fuel pilots' hope. The mirror catches flashes of dogfights behind them, Mustangs chasing Messerschmitts through low cloud. He can see the tide turning, not through official briefings, but through reflections of the sky itself. The mirror shows less enemy movement each mission. The air grows safer, if such a thing exists in war. After D-Day, the rhythm of combat shifts. Crews rotate home, replacements fill bunks. Romano counts down his missions, 24, 25, 26. Regulations say he could stop, but he volunteers again, feeling unfinished. The war is grinding down but not over, and he can't quite walk away while friends still fly. His hands are rough from cold metal, his ears permanently ringing. He dreams of silence but fears it too. One afternoon between sorties, he walks the airfield perimeter, watching mechanics patch bullet holes on returning planes. A lieutenant approaches with paperwork, official acknowledgement of his field adaptations improving rear visibility. There's no ceremony, no camera flash, just a handshake and a signature. Yet the note will travel up channels, through engineering boards, into the design drafts of the next generation of bombers. By late summer, the bombers roam skies once ruled by the enemy. They hit targets deep in Poland, Czechoslovakia, the Balkans. Each flight proves the same principle, that vigilance and adaptation win wars as surely as firepower. Romano's idea becomes standard procedure. Every new crew receives training on maintaining and positioning the tail mirror. No one questions it anymore. It's as natural as checking flaps or fuel. The system, born from one man's frustration and a scrap of glass, becomes doctrine without fanfare. And the man himself fades back into the ranks. Another airman among thousands. Autumn arrives. The English fields turn brown, fog lingering longer each morning. The pace of mission slows. Rumors whisper of the Reich collapsing, of Soviet armies closing in from the east. The sound of engines overhead no longer carries dread, but relief. Romano keeps flying until orders finally ground him after 31 sorties. He's exhausted, underweight, haunted by every formation that didn't return. When his crew disbands, they gather in the mess hall one last time, mugs of watery beer in hand. No speeches, just a shared glance that says enough. The next day, trucks carry them away from Bassingbourn, down muddy roads toward ships that will take them home. For months after leaving England, Romano finds it hard to adjust to silence. In civilian life, the absence of engine noise feels unnatural. He works as a mechanic, then a machinist, anything to keep his hands busy. The mirror idea still surfaces occasionally in letters from old crewmen. Stories of restored fortresses, museum exhibits, training manuals citing Romano modification. He smiles reading them but never answers. Recognition was never the point. The point was that a man with no authority changed something by seeing a problem nobody else looked for, and in that truth lies the quiet legacy of thousands like him. Small ideas multiplied across the war, engineers improvising parts from wreckage, medics turning ration tins into surgical tools, pilots rewriting tactics on cigarette paper. Together, they transformed chaos into progress. When historians later trace the evolution of bomber defense systems, they note a line, "Field modifications to tail visibility, initiated 1943-44. No name attached, just a timestamp buried in reports. But the men who flew knew the name. They remembered the mirror that caught sunlight and turned death away, if only for a second. As Europe finally falls silent in May 1945, the surviving fortresses return to American airfields. Crowds cheer, bands play, but many veterans step off planes quietly, eyes distant. Romano is among them. He touches the tail of his old ship one last time before walking away. The mirror, still mounted, reflects a crowd of waving hands and faces. For a moment he sees himself within that reflection, then turns, disappearing into the mass of ordinary life. Years roll by. The war becomes memory, then history. The airfields, where so many took off, now host grazing sheep or silent hangars turned to museums. Visitors walk among the relics, reading plaques, staring at the riveted skins of old bombers under dim light. Some children press their faces to the glass displays, trying to imagine what it felt like to be in those frozen skies. Among the artifacts, oxygen masks, flak vests, logbooks, there's sometimes a mirror mounted beside a tailgun turret. No grand explanation, just a note. Field modification introduced during the air campaign over Europe. Most pass it by without noticing, but veterans linger longer, recognizing the simple brilliance behind it. They murmur stories to their grandchildren about the gunners who could see behind death's shoulder, about one man who refused to fly blind. For Romano, life after the war moves quietly. He settles in the Midwest, marries, raises 2 children. He seldom talks about what he saw, not out of shame, but because language feels too small for those memories. He keeps a small keepsake box in his workshop, filled with mechanical odds and ends, including a fragment of mirror glass wrapped in cloth. On quiet evenings, when the light catches it just right, he turns it over in his hand, watching reflections dance along the ceiling. The world it shows now is peaceful, his wife tending a garden, the hum of summer cicadas, the distant sound of trains instead of engines. He realizes that this too is worth defending, and maybe that's what the war was really about, preserving the ordinary. In time, his children grow up and ask about his service. He tells them stories softened by years, not about burning planes or screams on the intercom, but about the camaraderie, the jokes scrawled on bomb casings, the feeling of seeing dawn from 5 miles high. He tells them about the mirror, how something so small could change everything. "We were all scared," he admits once, "but the trick was to find a way to see past the fear. That's what that mirror did for me. It gave me just enough light to look behind and keep moving forward." They listen, wide-eyed, unaware that this simple lesson about looking back to survive the future might be the truest inheritance he could offer. Decades later, when his health begins to fail, he donates the mirror fragment to a local museum. The curator, a young historian, labels it carefully and adds it to a display about innovation in wartime. She asks if he wants his name included. Romano smiles and shakes his head. "It's just glass," he says. "It's the idea that matters." When the exhibit opens, a group of veterans attend, standing quietly before the case. One of them, a man with trembling hands, salutes. Nobody says a word. In that silence, generations connect through reflection, literally and figuratively. The mirror catches their faces, merging old and young in one shimmer of light. Outside the museum, the world has moved on. Jets roar across skies once dominated by propellers. Technology has leaped forward, radar, satellites, stealth, but its roots trace back to those small human moments of improvisation. In every advancement, there's an echo of someone like Romano, an ordinary man in extraordinary circumstances, refusing to accept limits. His legacy isn't a headline or a medal, but a principle, that even in chaos, ingenuity thrives where necessity demands it. One winter afternoon, years after Romano passes, his grandson visits the museum. The building smells faintly of dust and oil, like an echo of hangars long gone. He stops before the tail gunner exhibit, reading the placard about field modifications. He doesn't realize at first that the small piece of mirror inside once belonged to his grandfather. Only when he notices the initials scratched faintly into one corner, AR, does understanding dawn. He stares at his own reflection in the glass, a young face mirrored by time, and whispers, "Thank you." In that moment, the story closes its circle. The past doesn't vanish. It reflects forward, alive in every gaze that remembers, and so from the frozen skies over Europe to the quiet halls of a small-town museum, one man's defiance endures. The mirror that once saved lives now captures peace instead of fire. It reminds us that history isn't written only in grand strategies or official records, but in the hands of those who refused to stop thinking, even when the world around them burned. The war is long over, but the reflection remains, clear, steady, eternal. Somewhere in that glint of light, between memory and sky, the gunner still watches, calm and vigilant, ensuring that the stories of courage and invention never fade into darkness. You've been watching Bloodstained Chronicles, where history still bleeds through time.